Welcome back, everybody, to the PetaPixel podcast. I am one of your hosts, Chris Nichols, and I'm joined by Jaron Schneider and Jordan Drake.
Hey!
Today we've got some very interesting news topics. Should Sigma make an APS-C L-mount camera? Very interesting. We're going to talk about that. Sony, should they add haptic feedback to future cameras with the shutter buttons? I think that'd be kind of sexy.
I kind of want that, actually.
Yeah, right? 7 Artisans, a brand that we need to review that we still haven't. They just have released a brand new 9mm f5.6, but that is for full frame, insanely wide. I would love to play with that. Our main story, though, today, very controversial. It's going to get a lot of feedback. CineStill's is being hammered for defending its trademark. We're going to look at both sides today. So join us now for the PetaPixel podcast.
This week's podcast is brought to you once again by OM System. Right now, OM System is offering some great fall savings on cameras and lenses. Now through November 15th, you can grab the compact, lightweight OM5 for just $999.99. That's $200 off its regular retail price. The OM5 isn't just another camera, it's a game changer. With class-leading IP53 dust-proof, splash-proof, and freeze-proof design, this camera can handle the elements, ensuring you'll never miss a shot. Rain, dust, or even a chilly fall breeze, I really hope most cameras can handle a chilly fall breeze, won't stand in your way. The OM5 is loaded with incredible computational features like Live ND and Starry Sky AF. With Live ND, you can capture dreamy long exposure effects without the need for bulky filters. And Starry Sky AF, which stands for autofocus, not what you might think AF stands for, makes astrophotography a breeze, allowing you to capture night skies like a pro. To make your photography experience even better, OM System has a special offer on the M Zuiko Digital ED 12mm f2 lens.
Oh, good lens. That's an oldie but a goodie.
Yeah, this fantastic lens is currently available at half price. Normally $799.99. You can get it now for just $399.99.
That's a killer deal.
That's it. So that's what, 24mm equivalent?
Yep. Beautiful lens, manual focus. It's really nice.
You can pair that with the OM5 for a perfect duo to capture beautiful autumn moments. Don't miss out. These fall savings from OM System are only available through November 15th. Visit explore.omsystem.com/petapixel or your nearest OM System authorized retailer to get your hands on the OM5 and 12mm lens today. Boy, I almost made it through that without making mistakes. I made 2. Thanks to OM System for sponsoring this episode. Before we get into the news topics that Chris so eloquently explained we're going to talk about. Thank you all for your feedback on the microphones. Jordan, I believe, is back on his Sennheiser, and Chris is on his Sennheiser. As you can see, I'm still using the Shure because I very much like this microphone.
Just hang on to it as long as you possibly can.
I very much like this microphone. I wrote a review on it based on all of y'all's feedback. I did read all the comments, and the purveying theme was the Shure sounded the best. I agree, and that's why I'm still using it. Excuse me. And so thank you very much all for letting us know your thoughts. Also, we agree the Sony did not sound fantastic, but its main selling point is like the wireless connectivity with a camera anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of what you're paying for with that one. And
it's not handy. It's not designed to go head to head with the Shure, unfortunately.
With what 10,000 sound engineers have recommended as the default microphone for broadcast.
All right, so let's. I'm rubbing my hands together. Let's get into these. So the first one here, I actually wanted to bring up because it's actually this whole story that I wrote the story, but it was actually Jordan's idea.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah. What, do you not like that? Jordan,
no, it's great. You're a fantastic writer.
Okay. All right, great. I'm loving this dynamic.
Sigma should make an APS-C L-mount camera. And you and I were sitting together in an Airbnb in Idaho when I noticed that Sigma had put an Instagram post up for that lens you guys just reviewed. And it was attached, 10 to 18. It was attached to a camera that doesn't exist. It just this gray block. And I was like, what is, like, it doesn't even, it's not like 3D rendered. This was an actual picture of it attached to something, and it got
On a
you
gimbal,
thinking.
gray block. Yeah.
Yeah, it looked a lot like a FP series camera, which so far have just been full frame.
Yeah, it looks exactly like all their other cameras. I couldn't even tell. I assumed it was just an FP because that's their design ethos. That's it.
But what I found really interesting is Sigma's really been doubling down on some good APS-C lenses recently. They just launched a 23 millimeter. They've got this 10 to 18, 18 to 55 just came out in new mounts. And included in those is L-mount, which has not had an APS-C camera since, what did we look up, Jaron? When was the Leica CL?
It was, I think it was 2017. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But what
More
I
than half a
pointed out
decade.
after looking at some of the information, for some reason, Sigma has been making these lenses, like the 30 millimeter f1.4 DCDN. You can buy that in L-mount for some reason.
Right.
You could put it on a body and use the APS-C mode. I mean, there's a few cameras that perform better that way, or, like the S5 2X that's filming me right now has a 60p crop, so it'll work.
Sure, but why? Well, why would you do that?
Okay, but I mean, here's the thing. Like this lens that they released though has been made for multiple mounts, right? I mean, it's Fujifilm X mount, Sony E mount,
but you can go and buy it for L mount. That's not free to do. Like, it's not expensive to make a new mount for one of these cameras. They're all basically like they just a metal thing, but they still had to manufacture that, and they still are selling it. Someone's got to stock it.
Yeah, they're in stock in camera stores, which I found really fascinating, as opposed to, if you remember the old Sigma SA mount, those were pretty much made to order. Like, I think you remember, Chris, like you would say, oh, I want a Sigma lens and a Sigma mount. You'd wait a month and it would come from Japan. That's what I would expect because this is such a niche use case. But having all those things out on the market right now really makes me think like they've basically got a full lineup when this 70 to 200 comes out for APS-C.
And you think an APS-C camera's coming? A brand new one?
I do.
I think Sigma knows something we don't, because why else would they be filling the market with products that are capable of doing something that no camera accepts?
What would stop them though from just taking something like the FPL with a huge megapixel sensor and just sort of perma cropping it to APS-C? I mean,
nothing, but that would still be doing what we're asking.
That before.
Yeah, still an APS-C camera. I mean, Sony does have that new 26 megapixel sensor that we were really impressed with for video, and Sigma's FP series have been quite video centric. So that would make a lot of sense. But also, they haven't released a camera with a decent readout speed, and they have no mechanical shutters. So we've always given those cameras a hard time as like, slow readout, no mechanical shutter. That's a bad combination.
All I ask is that
it is like, let's make a camera with a smaller sensor that can read out quicker.
All I ask is that it actually be made for human hands this time. That's all I ask.
I'm looking at this, and it is a perfectly squared rectangle.
Yeah.
So it would work great on a gimbal as shown, but I don't think that would be comfortable to hold.
It would be cool to see a rebirth of like the DP Merrill style cameras. Because it was a cute little thing, but again, not very comfortable to hold. I feel like they gotta make some sort of change in their design structure overall. I feel like they really like to go with these modern kind of strange designs. They've become kind of famous for it or infamous for it, but in the end, I don't find them that comfortable to hold or use. So let's see.
I wrote a line in
just
here.
do what Pentax did with the KP. In the box, 3 different grips. If you want a bigger, chunkier grip, there it is. A little thin one. It makes sense because it's so modular. I know you can buy bigger grips for those, but, you're special ordering those. You're not getting your hand on them. So, I would love to see that come out.
All right. Well, I know Jordan and I think it's already like in their pipeline.
I'm remaining skeptical. I'm remaining skeptical.
Maybe I'm just looking too much into this model, this mock-up of a camera that they stuck on Instagram. But I mean, it makes sense. I think we'll see it anyway. The next thing I wanted to get you guys' input on is Sony has patented a method of adding haptic feedback specifically to a camera's shutter button. What are your thoughts?
Sure. It totally makes sense given the fact that, especially on cameras like the A1 and the A9 where they're going with shutterless kind of designs, you get the red flash on the frame or something, which is kind of a feedback for you. But it makes sense to have a silent way of still giving you indication that you've taken a shot. So sure, makes total sense, I think.
I love that we've spent years being like, we have to get these cameras more stable, electronic first curtain shutter, IBIS, all of that. And then they're like, we got to figure out some way to shake this camera. So that would be my obvious concern is it would have to vibrate.
Thinking, in a very minor way.
Exposure is taken for that to work. Would probably be a necessity. But yeah, I think Chris is absolutely right. Like we've really wanted feedback on these cameras for a while. And I like what Nikon did where you could plug in headphones to hear the shutter going off while you're taking pictures, but it's still silent for like wedding shooters and photojournalists and stuff. But I think, just like a little bit of a bit of a feedback like we have on our smartphones would make a ton of sense.
Jordan just wants a light electrical shock.
Yes,
that'd be a very small one. He loves that stuff.
Yeah, just like when you get a little bit of a static charge from the laundry. That's what.
And then he'll be in the corner just firing his camera at nothing, and everybody's like, "What is that guy doing?"
I was thinking that the use cases for this. You touched on them. Like, there's two.
Oh, touched on them.
Did not intend that pun.
Do that a lot today.
The shooting at night, where you need to know, like, is this actually taking a picture, and you don't want to like put any light cast in it. Let's say you're doing astrophotography, but that does bring up the issue. Does that shake the camera? I would think that they would find some way that it doesn't shake the camera. It's got to be so, I don't know. Maybe it would, but they've got to have it communicate with the sensor to know that the exact vibrations that are coming. But the one that I think I would actually use, sorry, Chris, I'm not done.
No.
Is if I'm actually out there shooting like sports or something with like an A1 or an A9, I don't like just like the flashing at the edges of the frame in the EVF or the LCD. I don't feel like that's particularly helpful. I would prefer to feel it every time it's hitting a shot. I think that would be more useful to me than the flashing.
Especially for timing and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really tough when you just have a frame flashing at the edge of the frame to tell, like, am I shooting 10 frames a second, 20, 30?
It's just flashing. I have no idea, actually. Like, I'm not counting that. My eyes don't count, like, the number of flashes. I think I would feel it more reasonably than I would see it.
Totally.
Chris?
Yeah, no, it's an easy fix. I'm surprised people haven't done it already. So, yes,
I believe we saw a similar patent from Canon as well.
Yes.
So it seems like everybody's jumping on this, except Nikon.
Canon's patent, I think, also adds the ability to put the headphone in and hear it. So they're putting that in there as well. And then it's more than the shutter button, too. They're putting the haptics on a couple of the buttons on the back. So hopefully, I actually think fingers crossed, it'll be in the next generation of cameras. Like, there's speculation that it'll be like that feedback will be on the R1. But we have yet to even see proof that camera even exists. So
yeah, I'd love to see that in dials as well. One of my favorite features with the Ronin 4D, if you remember, Chris, was it would be like very smooth when pulling focus, but then when you set it to adjust shutter speed or aperture, you'd get like clicks on it.
That was
like
nice.
An actual like hard dial. So it'd be great to see something like that on like one of your control dials, be able to make it feel a little bit more.
All
like
it takes is battery life. Thing. That's all we need. Yeah. Yeah, that was sexy, actually. I really like that haptic feedback on the Ronin. That was nice.
Okay, last story that I wanted to get your guys' input on is 7 Artisans, which, by the way, I have yet to actually determine if it's a capital A or a lowercase a in this company's name. I've seen it both ways. I've seen it both ways.
Alpha symbol.
That's actually pretty funny. They have released a $479 manual focus, manual everything, no electronic connection with the camera.
Of course.
9mm f5.6 full frame lens. I was going to ask you guys, is there a lens that exists first party or third party that is this wide for full frame mirrorless cameras?
I think this is the widest.
This is a fisheye, though, right? I think that's
it's rectilinear.
Yeah,
it's rectilinear. Wow,
it's super wide. Now I looked at their sample photos that they sent, and they did send them at full res, and I did link them in full res. And this guy ain't that sharp, but those lines are straight.
I mean, there's obviously digital trickery going on after the fact for sure required. I'm very skeptical what the corners will look like.
That's the thing, right? There's no electric contact. So
a dumb lens. It's not the case. It's not a dumb lens. It's a lens that's not smart.
No.
Jordan is not disparaging Seven Artisans in any way or their product.
I don't know if it's an intelligent lens or not. I have no idea. But I mean, this is the thing that we're always seeing is people like, why aren't you guys talking about distortion when you do ultra wide lens reviews? Because things with contact, generally, if it's ultra wide, there's going to be tons of distortion in the original file. It's all corrected digitally. This one's really interesting because we can hold this up as kind of a demonstration of like, look, if you have a very well corrected lens that's small and affordable, the trade-off is it's not going to be that sharp, where we're just seeing boatloads of incredibly sharp ultra wide lenses for mirrorless cameras right now.
Of course, it could also be that they showed the sample photo after correcting it manually, right? I mean, which would make a lot of sense. I mean, I don't know. I think this thing's going to have quite a bit of distortion.
Well, on that note, Chris, I didn't tell you, but I have a surprise for you. This lens is coming.
Oh, great! I'm gonna check those corners. I'm gonna look at those corners. Jordan's gonna be there in one of the corners, clicking his little haptic feedback, and I'm gonna be checking the other corners. I'm gonna make sure that they're sharp because I don't know. It sounds cool. I mean, I'm all for it. I'm not trying to be skeptical. I think an ultra wide, that wide, sounds like a lot of fun to play with. But typically the corners suffer whenever you're doing these things because it doesn't look large. It doesn't look oversized.
No, it's a pretty small lens, actually.
But
they didn't have to put autofocus in it, and they didn't have to put any electronics into it. And by have to, I mean, I kind of wish they did, but they didn't because it now works with. It can work with like any mirrorless camera. I got it for you for E-mount, by the way, because I do know that your favorite camera is a Sony A7R5, so I'm sure that you could use it. You shill.
Well, it's just because I want to punish this manual, unintelligent lens with the highest resolution sensor I can find. So we're gonna beat the crap out of it. I am curious to see what the sun stars will look like. There is one shot here with little sun stars. They look kind of neat. I mean,
it's a 5-bladed aperture. So these Chinese companies, they love their 5-bladed apertures. That'll give you a 10-pointed sun star, correct?
I mean, it's not like we're really looking for shallow depth of field and bokeh balls and stuff on a lens like this. So might as well have good sun stars. Let's see.
Yeah, I actually am kind of excited to watch you do an entire video where you're forced to shoot at 9mm.
Do you even have to focus it? I don't know.
I think it has a reasonably close focusing distance too. It's actually you could actually play a little bit with it. Yeah, 7.9 inches from the sensor. So it's a 3.07 inch long lens. So that's close, a decent working distance.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Thanks for getting it for me.
You're welcome. I aim to please. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our main story, which is also a news story, and I'm gonna bring in Jeremy Gray.
Oh God, I don't want to do this. No, I'm scared. I don't want to do it.
So I brought Jeremy Gray in. Anyone who's listened to the podcast has heard me mention Jeremy Gray's name several times because Jeremy is constantly writing stories that I reference, and he also helps us out with getting some details correct for our podcast stories. He's our news editor who focuses mainly on the tech stuff, but also does some spotlight stuff. Spotlight is PetaPixel's term for anything that's like featuring photographers' work or work of any kind. Jeremy, hi, good to see you.
Hello, Chris.
Hi,
Jordan.
Jeremy.
Good to see you.
Look at that badass
apprehension in your
got.
voice is telling.
Yeah, this is a situation. To put it mildly.
So the name of this podcast is CineStill's Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Week, and it's because of what? Jeremy, I want you to just be as flat as you can, explain the situation, and then I'm gonna have you and Chris and Jordan and us and me, I guess I'll get in there too, talk about our thoughts on said situation. So take it away.
All right, I'll do my best to keep this succinct. So basically, CineStill has been a long time, relatively major player in the film marketplace. And a really big part of what's made them popular is their CineStill 800T film. Right. We don't need to get into all the nitty-gritty details about the technical specifics of this film, but basically 800 is the speed, T is tungsten, so the color balance of the film. And they started selling it about a decade ago, and until relatively recently, we're really the only company doing it, like selling it. And so basically, some competitors have been trying to sort of get into that marketplace and offer photographers an alternative to CineStill 800T. And CineStill has defended its trademark for 800T in a way that has made people extremely angry.
So what you're saying is CineStill trademarked 800T. So even though it is a speed and a color balance, the term 800T is owned by CineStill, correct?
Yes, CineStill does have that trademark. It was initially rejected, and then CineStill appealed it and was granted the trademark.
Was this a long time ago?
They were granted the trademark officially in September of 2022.
Oh, so no, it's very recent.
It's very recent. They applied for it in 2021. So it was a relatively lengthy process. It took over a year for them to officially get the trademark.
Okay.
So what I want to know is like, what is CineStill doing to protect their trademark?
Yeah, what's going on? What's the gist of the situation? Why does everyone hate CineStill this week?
So CineStill has been sending what they describe as courtesy notices to individual proprietors that sell on places like Etsy and eBay, and also to larger operations that have their own dedicated websites. And these courtesy notices, from my perspective, from the ones that I have seen, they seem relatively straightforward, pretty tame. However, some people are, I think, people who are receiving them are construing them as intimidation or threatening legal action. And, I think that's a fair thing to consider, that somebody receiving what CineStill calls a courtesy notice, the person receiving it may consider the implication of potential legal action if you do not take what we're telling you seriously.
Yeah. But that seems to me to be pretty basic business talk, right?
Correct. So CineStill says, we only contacted sellers who used our trademarks in product titles or descriptions and turned up in searches looking for our trademarks. So essentially, they were looking for anyone, if they Googled 800T, anyone who wasn't CineStill probably got an email like, hey, just an FYI, we own that as a trademark. You can't use it. Is that fair, Jeremy? Is that what they said? We own this trademark. You can't use it. You need to change the name.
Yes, that is what they said. Now, I'm in no place to tell anyone that their feelings, that somebody telling that to you is
not intimidating. You shouldn't feel intimidated. But
right, I'm not saying you shouldn't feel intimidated.
Right. You can't tell someone how to feel. And we have, in your story, you quoted someone who said, I feel intimidated by CineStill in its actions. And that's all really matters. If you feel intimidated, then it's intimidation.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, the compelling thing here, I think, is like, should they have been given this copyright? I mean, it's a description of trademark. Sorry, yes. Of a tool, essentially. Like if I had an Allen key set that had a specific size on it that had been available since the 70s, and then suddenly someone's like, oh, Black & Decker has trademarked that particular size. I mean, that's exactly what I see with 800T. It's the ISO and the white balance of the film.
Well, they're not saying you can't sell your versions of it. You just can't call it 800T. You can call it whatever else you want.
Yeah. But if I wanted an 800 speed tungsten balanced film, I would type in 800T. That's what I would do, because that's been the standard naming for as long as we've had color film, as far as I'm aware.
And I think the reason CineStill did this, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, is they were starting to see a lot of what they call knockoff versions of 800T coming out of China, and also maybe made by independent people elsewhere, that were just kind of riding the coattails, as they saw it, of CineStill's brand, and they basically like someone will sell it for cheaper. Like I looked it up just now. A roll of 36 exposures of 800T from CineStill costs $16.50. So that's not cheap. So someone probably made a cheaper version, and that's what the issue is with CineStill. And they also, as I read your story, they argue that anyone who would buy an 800T from someone else, and let's say they were dissatisfied with it, that would link CineStill's brand with that dissatisfaction. You don't think so, Jordan?
No, I really don't. Again, it's the name of the film on the box. Like what a lot of people don't know, and a big reason people are upset is CineStill doesn't make film. Like they don't have the means of making an emulsion or anything like that. This is the reason it's called CineStill. Is this is motion picture film, where they're removing the layer of the word that's escaping me right now. But basically, they're making it work in a photographic camera and meter properly, which is something that you can do yourself. So I think that's another reason that people are getting upset, because that you can do this yourself. And if I, went and was passing this on to other people, I would say like, hey, I have 800T film for sale. And it has nothing to do with, the perception of CineStill at that point. It's just that is how I would identify the film and what situations it's going to work in.
I guess on the flip side, though, from a business standpoint, they got the trademark, regardless of whether we think they should or not. They got the trademark. They were given it. They went through the. I mean, if you're Kleenex, you're gonna market the Kleenex name, right? Even though everybody else is typing in Kleenex when they're just looking for facial tissues, like it befits you to have that trademark from a financial standpoint, and they did it. And so, whether you agree with that or not, the fact is that remains. And so if they now have that legal trademark, then absolutely I would see why a business would then say, hey, this is our trademark. We went through the trouble to get it. We don't want other people using it, because everybody is trying to sell their own particular film, especially when you're not making your own emulsions, right? You want to make sure that people are buying your brand. I mean, that's business.
Especially if you own it.
Additionally, especially if you own it. I can't fault them for that.
Correct. Additionally, like this is something that is also being basically ignored. But if you own a trademark, Chris, and you don't defend it, you'll lose that trademark.
Yeah, it's like selling drugs, right? You got to be hard on the street, or else people take advantage of you.
You're legally obligated to defend your trademark. The trademark office does not defend for you, and if it goes to a case where someone challenges your trademark and you never defended it, you will probably lose it. So CineStill feels obligated to defend the trademark that they were legally granted. And okay, so one of the issues that folks have is the characterization that the story that you wrote, Jeremy, has. And it's that there is an angry mob and that there is misinformation. Can you talk about first the misinformation? What misinformation is out there? Because this sounds, what we've discussed so far sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So the misinformation that I was referring to, and is the focus of the article, is that a CineStill competitor, who, to be fair, does not believe himself to be a competitor of CineStill, Cat Labs, made a blog post right about as this major controversy was sort of kicking off. That's when he stepped in, made this blog post. The blog post's headline is that CineStill is suing us. And then a bunch of the body of the article itself continually claims that CineStill has filed a lawsuit, not only against Cat Labs, but against many other small companies around the world. And it's just not true.
Right. Isn't it fair to say that these two companies don't really like each other on a personal level either? There's been some bad blood for a while.
CineStill says there's bad blood. Cat Labs elsewhere has said they don't know what bad blood is being referred to. We reached out to Cat Labs with a bunch of questions. I asked, like, what's this lawsuit you're talking about? Like, what's the case? Like, this legal case that you say exists? Like, where is it? Like, how did the communications go with CineStill? What led to this? Like, all sorts of questions and no response. So, is it possible that some of what Cat Labs said is accurate? Yeah, some of it for sure. But like the claim that them or anyone has been sued by CineStill
Yes.
is fabricated, so far as we can tell.
But
Jeremy,
that's
There's no evidence to support that claim at all.
right.
Yeah. What I want to know, and what I think all the viewers want to know and all the listeners want to know is how many hundreds of feet of 800T were you given by CineStill, Jeremy? And where are you keeping it? And when are you going to roll some up for me and mail it over?
Just like Chris is a shill for Sony, you're a shill for CineStill, apparently.
Yeah.
A CineStill.
A CineStill.
CineStill.
Yes.
Wow.
That's a good one.
Wow.
That's good.
Well done, Jordan. Well done. You get some points.
I'll just put that in my bio.
As the editor of PetaPixel, I will like to say that CineStill has never spent any money with PetaPixel. They didn't spend any money here. They didn't spend any product. We have not been given anything by them. CineStill didn't even reach out to PetaPixel for this story. PetaPixel reached out to CineStill and asked them for their side of the story. And when we do this is our typical method for basically any story we do that involves multiple companies. We send questions to both sides. In this case,
This is not.
only one side responded.
Yeah. This is not CineStill film, by the way. This is Lomography film. So don't come after me, please, people.
And I think that is important too, to kind of take this back to sort of how we even got onto the story in the first place. And it's because multiple readers sent us tips about this, pointing to an original Reddit post.
Yeah.
Pointing
They
to
used the word
the Reddit
lawsuit.
post, and then a second time to the Cat Labs lawsuit claim. And, at this point, and, we were talking internally about it, and like, typically when we hear about situations like this, sort of the first impressions that we get and kind of the way that people are talking about it turns out to be at least pretty close to what's going on. So I fully expected to like dig into the story and find out that CineStill
Been a lawsuit?
Yeah.
Yeah, I expected to find a lawsuit, and I expected to find out that CineStill was doing all of the things that people said that they were doing, because that's not unusual. And I think that that's really important to point out, is that the idea of a relatively larger, albeit CineStill's not a big company, but in a small space like film, like the film market, while kind of having a resurgence, is still really small. So CineStill is a relatively large player in a small marketplace, and it's not uncommon for relatively large players to throw their weight around and wield the law as a sword and shield against any possible competition. And the characterization that CineStill is using the law to defend itself, I think that that's probably fair. But to claim that they're using it to attack and dismantle any potential competition, I just don't think that that's a fair characterization.
Yeah.
And,
I think
sorry,
what
go
struck
ahead.
me most about your article here, Jeremy, is you're basically, as a journalist, displaying the facts as you found them, right? What we know so far. It doesn't. I know that this post kind of can be seen as being pro CineStill. It really isn't. I mean, you're really just saying look, this is what we've reached out to. This is who got back to us. This is the information that we found. And kind of make your own mind up about it. You're just kind of stating, like you're supposed to, the facts as we know them. It's funny that people right off the bat get so sort of polarized on it's either CineStill's either like big pharma or they're out to just destroy everybody regardless of any sort of morality. So I don't know why people get so upset about this right off the bat. It's confusing to me.
Well, if you're only reading the headline, the Reddit thread was called CineStill is suing me, I believe, which is not true. So a lot of people will see that, maybe read the first line of it and obviously get upset because people want to have options with film. They're dwindling quickly. And I think people are also quite upset about even less choice when already so many film emulsions are getting discontinued. I can see why they would react that way. But they just needed more information, which is why we have Jeremy, which is a good thing.
I want to point out there is another story that got published today on 404media.co that tells the story also and says a lot of the same things that Jeremy did, but kind of comes at it from the perspective that everyone who's angry at CineStill is basically has the right to be. I do want to point out that Cat Labs did not respond to them either. I don't. Oh wait, no, he did. But there was a different company that we also reached out to that also did not respond to. I think it's Reflex Lab, right? That's the other one that they didn't hear from and we didn't hear from.
Yeah. So Cat Labs did speak to 404 Media, to Jason Kobler, who, I mean, at the risk of being a Kobler fanatic, is a fantastic journalist, and he's written a ton of amazing stuff. So people should really go read his article.
I'll link to it in the description.
It's a very good article, and I do want to not push back, but there is something about this new article on 404 that kind of reflects something that we've sort of noticed a lot internally as well, is that there is just such a it's very difficult to sort of figure out what's going on, but not everybody, I shouldn't generalize. Most people seem very happy to just be like, CineStill's suing a bunch of people, and then when they find out that CineStill's not suing people and hasn't filed any lawsuits, and to just like blow right past that, like it's not like that, it's not a big deal or problematic, that so much of the early part of this overall situation and narrative was driven by like fabricated information.
Yeah.
And
I will say that in that article, he does kind of blow right past it. Doesn't really linger on the fact the title and the contents of Cat Labs' blog is not true.
Mm-hmm. No. And we've also, he refers multiple times to CineStill's behavior just like outright as being like threatening or intimidating. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned in my article, that's totally open to interpretation. That's not how I personally see it.
But that doesn't matter. If someone feels like they've been threatened or intimidated, that's all that matters. And in this case, I think that's where people are now latching onto. They don't care that what Cat Lab said wasn't true. What they've concerned themselves with is that it is true that CineStill is bullying people. I will say that to play complete neutral here and devil's advocate, that it's completely reasonable to feel as though CineStill has wronged a great number of people and companies by defending a trademark, even though they have the legal obligation to. And it is also worth pointing out that whatever CineStill was trying to do, which is prevent people from buying the wrong, in their eyes, wrong, I'm putting up air quotes for those who are not or watching us on YouTube, the wrong film, they have torpedoed their brand. And by we, I mean Jeremy in his story mentions that this, as every right that CineStill has to do this, probably wasn't the smartest idea in hindsight. Because now, by doing what their legal obligation was, they've riled up every person that would be purchasing from them. And this is going to hurt them significantly. Because it is, as you mentioned earlier, Jeremy, a very small group. The people that like analog film they talk and they aren't happy.
Yeah. And I do want to just quickly jump back to the headline that we selected. And
the flaming torches, that was a nice touch.
Yeah. So, that featured image was my idea. And in hindsight, probably would have chosen something different. Not that I think that it's actually misrepresentative of the situation, but in a situation like this, And I think a big part of why people are not only so upset in general, but also so willing to like ignore certain aspects of the story that I think are really important, is that people are extremely passionate about this. And like analog photographers are, they may be small in number, but they're like very loud in influence and voice, and they care so deeply about the community. And when CineStill says that they also care very deeply about this company, I think that that is sincere, but I think that whatever they thought was going to happen from all of this, like there's no way that this is the path they would have chosen had they known how it was going to go. I don't think, personally. I can't speak for them.
Right.
Despite what some people think, I don't speak for them. but like you can absolutely make the case that a legal obligation, or even to lessen that a bit, just a legal right to protect yourself, does not always mean that that's what you should do. And there's a very, I wish that I could say that legality and morality always overlap, but we all know that that's not at all the case.
No.
And in this case, there's plenty of space to think that CineStill behaved wrongly from a moral perspective. And I think that a big part of that is that people just care so much about this, and they care about the accessibility of film, the availability of film, and film is expensive to shoot as it is. So when there's this impression that a company that has a dominant market share in a specific facet of film, that they're doing something to sort of to squash competition or to protect their bottom line, if that's the perception that people have of them, I totally get why people would get really mad about that. Because like, if that was all that was happening and that was the entire story, which like again is kind of what I expected the story to be, like that's awful. So like that initial outrage makes a ton of sense, but continuing that outrage, in part fueled by the idea that CineStill has been like outright suing people, is just bad. Like that's a bad kind of way to carry yourself online, I think.
Yeah.
And I do kind of wish I hadn't described people as an angry mob, but
But they proved you right.
I mean, yeah.
Because
like,
for what it's worth, many of them, I'm getting the sense, did not actually read the story to understand that you were sitting in the middle and had a sense that both sides had something of importance to say. I'm going to have to, start curling this down. So, Jeremy, thank you for coming on and explaining the situation. And I say never read the comments because it's one of our core tenets of this podcast, but I really am scared to read the comments.
Can we just not read the comments this time?
Anyway, Jeremy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jeremy.
I'm sorry that this situation was just way more spirally than you ever intended. So, cheers, man.
Yeah,
the official
PetaPixel
CineStill.
Yes, the official CineStill.
But yeah, send me some of that film, all right? Like,
well, I don't shoot film, so.
Oh, you don't even shoot film? What are you doing taking film from CineStill? Oh.
Stop giving people the idea that he's actually taking from them under
well,
the
it's
table
just so
Chris.
ridiculous. It's so
absurd.
ridiculous.
It is
so
it is so ridiculous.
If I could just one sort of final sort of thing. There's a ton of 800 speed tungsten film out there. It still exists. Like, don't fall under any impression that CineStill has bullied everybody out of the marketplace. It's out there. Do what you will
with that information.
Like, it's really important that people still understand that they do have options, and that CineStill has not eliminated options for people. So shoot film, like, enjoy it, be happy. It's awesome that people still care so passionately about film. So I hope people can get what they're looking for at the prices that they want to pay, and everyone hopefully can move forward, but I don't know. I think there's a very large rift now. So
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Jeremy.
thank you. See you guys.
Good to see you.
Bye.
He's in a tough spot because,
Yeah.
like, I feel like as his editor, I feel like he did his best to present both sides of that story.
To run that line. I guess the thing that I keep laughing about, because the thing that I do find ridiculous is how often, if you say something that people don't agree with, you're automatically on some sort of payroll. Like, it's like a go-to. And so I always react quite strongly to that, because of course we've gotten that over the years many times.
Yep.
And it's so baseless. And so you can't help but react in a really, flabbergasted way, because just like, honestly, and if you, like you say, Jaron, if you do read the article, Jeremy's really not towing anybody's line. I mean,
Nope.
you always have
No, but you'd have to read the article, Chris. Why would anybody do that?
Yeah, you've always got what one side says, and then you got what the other side says, and then the truth is always in the middle. It never lies on either side. So some critical thinking is required.
Okay, boy, heavy conversation. We're gonna move on to the more fun stuff. Let's talk about some tech support. I've got quite a lot here. We'll see how many we can get through. We're going to start with an email from Christopher Diodario, who asks, I have shot over 500,000 images on an iPhone and a Nikon P900, and I'm ready to purchase a decent camera. Budget is not an issue, rather complexity of the camera relative to being an amateur. I shoot images of family, vacations, and the ranch. The three cameras I have been contemplating are Fujifilm X-T5, Nikon Z8, Sony A7R5. I have viewed all of your videos, Chris and Jordan.
Yes.
And I am at a loss to make a final decision. Any advice?
Any advice would be greatly appreciated. This is a tough one. Obviously, whenever we get questions like this, the thing we want to know is, what is the context? What kind of photos you're going to take? Now, they have mentioned lots of family stuff, vacations, and ranch. And
it's the complexity of the camera they are most concerned about. And I think it's funny that all three of these are complex cameras.
Yeah. I mean, I think any mirrorless camera, to be fair, I don't think mirrorless camera is that complicated. And I know I'm saying that from a position of expertise. And so that might be flippant. But honestly, like, cameras are designed that you can use a lot of these cameras without having to have a ton of knowledge. I don't feel like people have to like invest a ton of knowledge until they're ready to get the most out of the camera, or shoot photography that's more demanding, like sports, action, wildlife, that kind of stuff. That being said, because they're saying vacations and stuff like that, the X-T5 does make a lot of sense. It's very compact. It's a fun camera to take with you. You've got lots of lens options. You have telephotos. I mean, if they're using a P900, they absolutely appreciate longer lenses for maybe shooting horses and wildlife and stuff like that on the ranch. So I don't know. A7R5 is definitely, I mean, Z8, A7R5, you're talking more expensive. I think that's a great option, the A7R5, if you want really high image quality.
Yeah, you Sony
if you're going to do any promotional material. But again, it sounds like more of just a casual camera.
Speaking of shilling, Jordan's over here wearing a Fujifilm t-shirt.
I realized that after we started recording. How
many X-T5s did they send you to get that shirt on camera, Jordan?
So I took kind of a different tactic with this, is like, without going in and going through a bunch of settings, which camera is going to perform best out of the list that he gave us there. And that's what made me kind of lean towards the A7R5.
A7R5.
They've now got real-time tracking on by default. I mean, it still shoots high-quality JPEG out of the box, which is, in my opinion, madness for anything that costs over $1,000. But they all do that. But yeah, without going in and messing around with settings, you'll get very consistent results, where we've found with the Nikon and the Fujifilm, when we were doing autofocus tests, you had to actually go and tweak a lot of settings for those. So if you want something you can just grab, set the exposure, and get good results, the Sony might be my first choice out of those. But if you enjoy the experience of, I want to really just focus on base photographic principles, then yeah, the X-T5 is more fun to use. I really do enjoy using those, mechanical dials. We've talked about that on the podcast. I think it's a great way to take pictures.
But again, I will say, the A7R5, if he was to buy that, I feel like for the rest of his life, that camera is probably going to be great.
Sure. Yeah, it's a fantastic camera and it's fast shooting. I don't know. I feel like even on XT5 though, you're basically going to stick it into aperture priority mode and fire away, right? I mean, that's what most people are going to do, and that wouldn't be too hard to set up. So yeah, I would say, Christopher, just consider also size. The XT5 lenses will be smaller, the body itself will be smaller. If compactness is a big part of it, that would be great. If not, yeah, A7R5 would always be my choice personally. And I'm not even wearing a Sony shirt.
Yeah. Do you even have one? I bet you do. I bet you have a Sony shirt.
I don't have a Sony
Here,
shirt.
just a sec. I got some gaff.
I probably have like a Kondo headband or something, which swayed me heavily, let me tell you.
Are you covering it up?
There we go. No longer.
There you go.
No longer shilling.
All right.
Man, anything for a buck, this guy.
Okay, the next one is a question from SpeakPipe from Eric.
I have been shooting since the A6000 came out due to my studies in vision, and I wanted to ask you guys if you can mention some devices more focused to astrophotography, that is, E-mount compatible telescopes, trackers, etc., as I intend to gaze at the skies more intently. Any recommendation for such devices? Thank you in advance.
Do you shoot much with this kind of thing, Chris? I don't.
I don't shoot a lot. No, like I love astrophotography, but not with the star trackers and things like that. Or I mean, certainly getting a motorized equatorial mount like a star tracker so that you don't have issues with star rotation can be very cool. Mm-hmm. It lets you unlock much longer exposure times, which can be beneficial, especially on a camera like the A6000, which is not a particularly powerful low light camera. It's not aimed at it anyways. But as for just looking astronomy wise at the stars, I do that quite a bit. So I've always liked Dobsonian style telescopes. I find them to be, although very bulky, these are the large, big tubed telescopes. They're hard to carry around, but you get good magnification, you get great light gathering. I like them from just a standpoint of they're very simple. They're very easy to use. They're very simple. And so I've always had sort of a pull to those. That being said, if you've got the budget, a high-end Schmidt-Cassegrain style telescope is going to give you a much more compact body design, easier to transport, and as well it unlocks the ability to have motorized mounts for that telescope, which means if you want to stick a camera on it and use it as a lens, you have that benefit, but also just actually looking at objects celestially, the mount can actually follow them as we rotate, as they move. Whereas with a classic Dobsonian style telescope, as simple as they are, a Newtonian refractor style, you have to like point it and move it and keep moving it, adjusting it to follow things in the sky. And that can be a bit of a pain. So yeah, if you've got the budget, go for a nice 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain that gets you pretty far into a lot of interesting viewing purposes from Earth.
Jordan?
One thing I would definitely point out, like I think an equatorial mount is a great thing if you're experimenting with that, but there are limitations. A lot of people think like, oh, if you have an equatorial mount, you can just do unlimited length exposures, which is absolutely true because it's rotating as the stars move overhead. The problem is my favorite astro work has a foreground element in it, and that is now going to start being blurred as the mount moves. So there is, you will certainly be able to do longer exposures than you can without, but don't get the impression that you can, shoot at 100 ISO and leave the shutter open for half an hour because you'll wind up with beautiful stars above a crummy foreground element. So just be aware of that. I've seen that mistake a lot, especially back when we worked at the camera store.
Yeah, it really depends what you want to shoot. Jordan's absolutely right. I mean, for tracking purposes, I think there's a lot of cool stuff where people actually use the telescopes as a lens. And I mean, there's way too much to get into here, and I'm no expert on it, but make no mistake, it's not a small endeavor. Okay. There's lots that you have to set up and test and try. It's very technical, but yeah, that's where if you want to start taking photographs of planets, or you want to start taking photographs of galaxies, or, nebula and stuff, that can be really cool, but it takes a lot of work.
Cool. All right. Next one is also a SpeakPipe. This one's from Logan.
Hi, guys. So I do video professionally, more specifically wedding videos. I also do some photography, but that's more of a hobby. I'm a big Panasonic fanboy, and I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to buy a used Panasonic camera, what's the best bang for my buck? I don't have a very big budget, so I'm looking for something that is ideally under about $1,500 US. I'm looking at the S5, S1, GH6, GH5 II. I don't have a huge preference for sensor size. I just want something with good video features for my wedding work and something that at least takes decent photos. Right now I use a G9, but I'm not very invested in micro four thirds glass. All my lenses are pretty cheap and entry level, so switching sensor sizes is not a deal breaker because I'd be buying new lenses anyways. Thank you very much, and I love the show.
This feels like a Jordan.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you already have a G9, then you know what you're getting with the GH5 II or a GH5 if you grab one of those. It's the same sensor. You know, it's a different design on it. But the image quality that you're getting out of that G9, especially if you've updated the firmware, will be exactly the same with those. So if you're looking for an improvement, it really depends. You can go one of two ways. If you go the full frame route, then the S5 original is an absolute steal, especially because you're probably pretty good at manual focusing if you're working with the G9 right now. Beautiful image quality, you get the full V-Log profile, so you're going to see improvements in low light performance, dynamic range, access to shallower depth of field if you want it. Problem is, it's a slower reading sensor than what you've got right now. So if you find yourself often shooting 60 frames per second, like wedding, a lot of people are shooting a lot of slow motion with that. It might be worth looking at if you can get a used GH6 or a G9 Mark II would make a lot of sense there, because now you're unlocking something creatively you didn't have before with the very fast readout. You know, shooting 4K 120 is going to really set some of that footage apart from what other people are doing. And in the case of the G9 II, you are getting that great autofocus, but obviously that's going to be a premium, where I can see there's a lot of GH6s on the used market at a good price right now, because a lot of people probably did what we did and they're using the G9 II instead.
Very well. All right. Next question is from David. This was an email. So I have a GH5 and a G7. I bought a bunch of Lumix glass, including a 12 to 60, 3.5 to 5.6.
Great lens.
I only use it for...
Not the 3.5 to 5.6. Never mind. I was confused. Go ahead.
I only used it for about a year, and the flex cable ripped, so I can't control focus. I know there are people that already had this issue with Lumix lenses, so I was wondering if the Olympus lenses are better and more durable for longer use, or what options would be better. And before you answer that, related, we actually got a speak pipe from Joni. I'll play that now, and you can kind of address both of these questions simultaneously. So here's what Joni said.
Hi, guys. So I was wondering if you have ever heard about bad quality control on the Panasonic Lumix S line of lenses. I've had 3 24-105s now that had an unacceptable amount of dust inside with even big chunks. There is posts on the internet about weird bubbles appearing inside the lens. Same for their 24-70 Pro, the 50 Pro, and now I have my 51.8 that's showing these same bubbles. So is this a problem that Lumix has more than other manufacturers and needs to address, or is this just bad luck on my part?
I mean, if you'd talked to us 3 weeks ago, I would have said, like, madness. This is not something I'm aware of at all. But we were very recently shooting on in Idaho on razors, which are like giant ATVs that kick up a ton of dust. And yeah, we've got some issues with some of our panny glass. Both the 10 to 25, my favorite video lens on Earth, got a bunch of dust in the inside of it, and the 24 to 70, my favorite full frame standard zoom as well. These are my bill paying lenses. Both do have some internal dust there. And I think a lot of it comes down to they have this brilliant mechanical focus clutch that I always point out whenever people are asking. I mean, Jaron, you shot with one for the first time and mentioned that was a really nice feature to have. But I wonder if that is allowing some of the dust in. Now, the 24-105 doesn't have a clutch. And I'm actually being filmed on one right now and haven't had any issues with that. We use it in the field quite a bit. But yeah, it does look like there's some potential issues with sealing because we had a Sony 2470 G Master that got off scot-free on that same shoot.
Took it like a champ. Yeah, took it like a champ.
The same exact situation.
Yeah, that fine particulate dust is brutal on any gear. Like it's very, very rough. But at the same time, as Jordan says, he's very hard on gear, very hard on gear. And these are not cheap lenses that we're using, and we've used them for years with no problems. Like we haven't had any issues with flex cables ripping or any of the barrels coming undone or getting bent or anything like that. Like they've actually stood up really well. It was really the dust that finally got in there. As far as the bubbles appearing on Joni's lenses, that sounds like a separation of glue and the elements. That should not be happening. That's the only thing I can imagine when you start to see little bubbles in the coating like that. I don't know. I don't want to say that these people are having bad luck because
I mean,
in our experience,
three of them, 24 to 105s, and I'm wondering if they all came from the same batch, if he's getting them from the same retailer to replace the previous one.
In that regard, she's saying dust, and I could see that because if these lenses, they're like we found, they're maybe not sealed against dust very well. So if she is using these in a dusty situation, that could just be the lens design, unfortunately. But the bubbles and the ripped cables, that seems strange. I mean, the 12 to 60 3.5 5.6 is a kit lens, but you still shouldn't be having ripped cables. And that really shouldn't be happening from regular use, right? It's not like you have access to those cables very easily. So
yeah, it's just crazy to have two of these come in 1 week at the same time. And we're also running into this issue ourselves. But we've been shooting Panasonic for a long time and haven't really encountered
And our case is very special. Like that was, I'll put it
nuts.
up. Yeah. You can see pictures of us after how coated in dirt we are. So you can see exactly what those pieces of equipment were subjected to, and it was significant.
It was teetering at the edge of irresponsible. Is how I would put it. But I will say as well, because they mentioned specifically the Olympus and OM glass, I've never had an issue with those. And I know going back to when we worked at the camera store, almost never, anything that was rated weather sealed, we almost never saw coming in with something actually getting inside of it. And I know Chris uses the 12 to 100 all the time as his like fly fishing primary lens. And yours is still fine, Chris.
It's doing great, well. And I mean, we did have the Olympus 150 to 400 with us in those same conditions as well. And so there was no dust issues there either, and again, we're talking very expensive lenses, but what we can surmise from this is that the Panasonic lenses, as rugged as they are, even the professional ones are maybe not as well dust sealed.
They have a breaking point, and we found it. The other thing worth mentioning is if you do plan to use Olympus lenses on Panasonic bodies, which you absolutely can do, we did it, you will not get the benefit of the proper communication between the lens stabilizer and the cameras in body image stabilization. No. Jordan, you were saying it'll kind of fight you a little bit, especially if you're using like some of the specialized, very, very good Panasonic stabilization modes. I say that like with some emphasis because I was so impressed with tripod mode on those cameras.
It's staggeringly
insane.
Yeah, you're just going to have to choose between IBIS or your lens-based stabilization if you do that. Like it'll still get the power through it. But yes, the sync Panasonic's IS2 mode and then Olympus's Sync IS are the best stabilization out there. And unfortunately, they won't function properly if you're juggling between the two different
mixing brands.
Yeah. All right. So we'll move on to Never Read the Comments, where we make sure to always read the comments. And this one is actually another speed pipe from Wayne Goodman. And also of note, it is Panasonic related. So here we go.
Hi guys, I'm looking at buying a Panasonic G9 II, and I noticed in your video review of the G9 II initially, you said that the GH6 had some issues with the sensor at lower ISOs. I think up to like ISO 400 or 800 there was some invariance going on. I just wondered, do you know at this point if the G9 II has remedied this, or has it got a different sensor, or has it got the same sensor and the same problems? I'm just trying to decide my next camera purchase because I like the 25 megapixels and I like the small lenses of Micro Four Thirds. So this would actually be a really apt camera for me, but I am a still shooter and not a video shooter, and therefore I just wondered if they'd fix that problem at all. Thanks.
Yeah, so I have actually been corresponding with Bill Claff from Photons to Photos, which, if you're looking to check cameras and compare photographic dynamic range, is the best website out there. And he does an incredible job with it. And we are seeing some inconsistencies while we're testing this right now. So we're not sure if it's down to RAW support. Apparently using Retina displays isn't great for doing some of the testing I've been doing. So anyways, we are working on it. And in the future, as promised, we are going to do an OM1 versus G9 II video. I will have photographic dynamic range results by the time that comes out. So just hold on a little bit longer and we'll have some answers for you. I would not expect that it's going to be dramatically better than what we've had before in Micro Four Thirds dynamic range. We just want to know what the compromise is for that super fast readout. So answers are forthcoming. I'm working on it with a very smart person. So we'll get there eventually.
Fantastic. All right. So I was reading all of the comments on the iPhone versus the Nikon Z8 video, and the general consensus, overwhelmingly actually, was that you guys did a very good job with this video. They liked that the angles that you took were different than what the other people who do comparisons like this typically was, and they said, thank you, good job. On that note, there's one question from Edison Johnson 8638 who says, great piece as always on your thoughts about the iPhone 15 Pro Max as a camera for photography versus a great pro grade camera. Would love for Jordan to do the same for use in pro video, perhaps for a video project where the iPhone is his only option that he must use to its ultimate ability, comparing and contrasting it to his experience doing the same with pro video equipment. I would say your G9 II love would be put to the test here.
Yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun. In terms of image quality, I think it's very doable, especially now that we've got third-party apps like the Blackmagic app that's going to let me control my shutter speed. Get some filters for that will make a lot of sense. I am very wary of doing this still because we had, as Chris will attest, endless issues with USB-C microphones kicking in and out while we were trying to use them for A-roll. I think I could shoot some beautiful footage, but I do not want to do talking points on an iPhone maybe ever again.
We could,
I don't know. We'll try it again next year.
We could get a rig. In fact, I think I actually have an iPhone rig around here that you could try.
If you want orchestral sweeping scores and some lovely graded Apple log footage, I'm there for you. I got your back. But if you want Chris talking, it's going to be on a real camera for the foreseeable future.
But I think it would be an interesting challenge for you to do it. And I think people would learn a lot from that, the ins and outs of it. I mean, the iPhone 15 Pro Max video quality is quite substantial. It's more capable
it's
than
gorgeous.
people think.
Yeah. I want to do a very quick detour. I know we're getting towards the end here.
Go ahead.
But I was just doing the Pixel 8 Pro review where I did shoot my talking points on it. And I discovered something that we didn't have time to talk about in the review because it mostly impact us. But people should be aware of it if you want to do serious video with a phone. That camera records a variable frame rate. It'll ping pong, even though it's at 30 frames per second, between 29.95 all the way up to like 30.1 frames per second. So if you do external sound sync like I did, then God help you, my friends, because it will be drifting in and out perpetually. You can set it to 30 in the camera, but it does seem like just based on how much movement's in the frame, that data rate is going to be swinging all around. I got a very different frame rate when I was doing stabilization tests because the whole frame is moving.
That's such a big no-no.
It sucks, and the iPhone doesn't do that. So if you're doing external sync, it sucks.
That outrageous no-no.
A lot of dash cams do this, but for something that's aimed at more serious users, it totally sucks. So here on the podcast, I'm warning you. Hopefully, they update this in firmware.
Big thumbs down. That would drive me up the wall. I am sorry you had to deal with that. Okay, next one is going to be from Codrin. They also piped it up. We got a lot of these this week, and I'm trying to get through them so we don't have a backlog. Here we go.
Hey guys, big fan of the podcast. I rarely, if ever, listen to podcasts before I found yours. My question is about gear. I have a Z6 II and I love it. I think it's more camera than I will ever need for my projects and professional work. But I feel like I also itch for a camera that is all about the experience of shooting. A camera that challenges me and invites me to shoot all the time. It does not need to be technologically advanced. An example in my mind is the Epson RD1. but do you have any other recommendations?
I feel like this is like my mental state because I have an R5 and I shoot that for like whenever I need a picture of something for work. But this thing never comes with me for fun. And I want a fun camera, but unfortunately I am poor and cannot afford the fun camera that I want, which is a Leica. So, Chris, if I can't afford a Leica and I don't want to try and find one of like the 100 remaining good conditioned Epson RD1s that exist.
Yeah, that would be probably as expensive as a Leica anyways.
Yeah. What should I buy? What should we buy?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think then in that same note, you could challenge yourself in a few ways. I mean, having something that has a fixed lens can be interesting. Like a Ricoh GR series, I think would be great. That would be a fun camera to challenge yourself. It's not crazy expensive. It's a very different experience than what you're probably used to with the Z6 II. So that could be fun. Any of the older Fuji X100s could be a good little camera as well for fun. And a lot of them will be fairly affordable. My brain first went to that DP Merrill. I don't know how easy those are to find anymore, but that is
just because we were talking about it earlier. Do you actually want to shoot with a DP Merrill?
You know what? The photos are beautiful. Like, if you're looking for something that's like a totally different departure photographically than what you're used to, that thing, the battery basically lasts as long as a roll of film. You get like 36 shots and the battery's done.
You can find it.
Is actually
I'm seeing it on
eBay.
I'm seeing several here between 385.
Are they crazy expensive? They're probably not too bad.
Between 385 and 750, 900 sometimes.
Oh, that's way less than I thought they would be. So that's like they take beautiful photos, and it's really kind of a frustrating but challenging experience in a way. I would almost treat them like a large format camera where you really got to set up your shot, think about it, plan it out properly, camera on the tripod, fire away. But if you like landscape and stuff, they actually take beautiful photos. They really do. But yeah, challenge yourself with a small pocketable camera. The other thing you could do is go point and shoot. I mean, that's kind of popular now. Go digital point and shoot. Bring something like that back out. That could be a very different departure from what you're used to shooting right now. And there's so many to talk about there.
Yeah, you went the same direction I was going to go. Is the LX100 II is a very small camera with a lot of manual controls. It's also kind of interesting in that you can shoot different aspect ratios at the same resolution with it, which can be a lot of fun. Just creatively, like, you know what, I'm feeling very square today, and just go shoot that. Great little camera that you can get at a good price.
You can still find it in stock,
but otherwise, like Fujifilm, kind of owns this for a reason. They're wonderful, ergonomics on them. They are a lot of fun if you want to get your hands on those actual dials.
Don't look at a shirt,
that's their main strength right now. Oh, I'm shilling hard again.
Don't
I need more tape.
I really want to get a ZF in green. I think that will be the camera that I would want to take places and shoot.
That would be fun.
That's what I want.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Or ZFC. ZFC would be fun too.
I'm a snob. I want the full frame. Okay. Couple more. Dylan on SpeakPipe. This is actually just a nice one. No questions. Just wanted to say things. So here we go.
Hey, this is Dylan from Live Life Creative. I want to say thanks to Chris for shouting out my comment on the video, commenting on how the lighting looks good. Thanks for that. I also want to share how I learned photography. I actually married into camera ownership. When I got married, my wife had a camera, and I just pulled it out one day and started messing around with it, watched some YouTube videos. Now I have a nice little freelance business on the side, earning some extra money. So yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dylan. And you know what? And thank you to Dylan's wife for making this all possible. So we appreciate that, for marrying that guy. Good job.
3 more questions, and we're doing pretty good.
We're going to bang through them.
So here we go. This one is from Bromby 8153. They have some concerns about you. Credibility issues. Yes. I've been a fan of Chris and Jordan since their early days from the camera store. I've always appreciated their honesty and still love their chemistry. Now, however, I am concerned that the OM system sponsorship may be biasing their opinions and affecting their credibility. I recall Chris and Jordan's fully justified disappointment at the OM5 in their DP review. That feels weird to read. DP review. Recently, their opinion of the OM5 seems to have improved dramatically. Not a coincidence. I'm wondering what will happen when OM releases a new camera or lens. Will we get an unbiased, honest review that we've seen in the past, or a shootout between the new Panasonic G9 II versus OM1? Don't get me wrong. I'm not trolling, and I don't disagree. I don't think he is either. I'm just expressing a legitimate concern. Once one's credibility is gone, it's hard to recover, and I sincerely hope that Chris and Jordan don't lower their standards just to please a sponsor.
That's fair. I mean, I here's the thing. First off, Jordan and I are really old, and the older you get, the less you change. So I don't think we're going to change in the way that we've always prided ourselves on being unbiased, and we continue that to this day. At the same time, I do totally understand. We have a sponsorship for this podcast. We talk about the OM5, but the OM5. If I was going to defend it, it's that. Our main disappointment with the OM5 was not that it was a bad camera, simply that it was not a major update over the EM5 Mark III, that it was largely the same camera rebranded. And we would still absolutely stay that. But it is still a very beautiful, very compact camera with a lot of lenses that has all of the really good OM, live ND, and handheld high res, like all the good sort of computational photographic processes that I really appreciate in these cameras. So I still stand by the fact that it's an absolutely nice camera. But yeah, it is a rebrand. I don't think we would ever change how we honestly say things about cameras, even if we're sponsored. And we were very careful about what sponsors we do choose. I mean, it's not like Jaron just comes to us and says, hey, you guys are shilling for these guys now. No, it's always like, how do you feel about working with these people? Is this going to be an issue? Is there anything that you foresee that would be a problem? He's always very upfront about that and very good about that. So we try to choose the sponsorships very carefully. And now, Jordan, I'll let you add what you want to add on there.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say two things. First of all, OM sponsors this podcast. We're not reviewing OM gear on this podcast. If they are sponsoring an episode, it's not a review. That is something Chris and I are not going to be doing. The other thing is we did ads for all the camera companies back at the camera store days. People seem to have forgotten this, but I remember doing Fuji ads, Canon ads, all kinds of stuff back in the day there. And yet we still have maintained this reputation for, making sure that we can recommend the right camera for the right people. I don't see that changing over time.
No, we don't learn new tricks. We're not good at the influencer.
I also want to point out that Chris and Jordan are behind my editorial wall, meaning the companies that we work with that sponsor episodes, Chris and Jordan do not have direct contact with. They either go through me or through one of our sales representatives, and what they get, those sponsors they get from that communication. Chris and Jordan are not feeling pressured by these brands to say certain things because they literally can't. Gear is sent to them for review, and sponsors are worked through other routes. So I wanted to put this out there because I do think it is an important thing to discuss. And if it is asked again, I'll probably put it up here again and discuss it again, because sponsorships and ads are tricky business, but we do our best job here at PetaPixel to make sure that editorial integrity is not compromised.
And we do legitimately appreciate you bringing up that concern. Absolutely.
Okay, last two questions. We might go over time, but I don't care. First one is from Mark Laurendit. What do you think? What do you think, Chris? How do I say that? Mark
Lauren, and then it's Det 1861, which was a great
this is okay. This is related to the microphones. While the mics sound good, it would be great if they did not have to take center stage. And interestingly, Jordan heard this differently than I did.
We went two different
Jordan
ways
thought
here,
you meant that we shouldn't talk about our microphones on the podcast as like the center stage of conversation. And I think you mean that they shouldn't be so large in frame. I don't think on Jordan's end, I don't think we talked about them very long, only that we're using them and I wanted your opinion. No. And on the other end, it is not physically possible to make the mics sound good, as you've said, and also not have them here. They are near field directional microphones. They have to be here. Otherwise, they sound like this.
Now I'm
and this
shouting.
Is bad. They need to be here.
They want that warm.
Plus, they keep my head centered. If I don't have the mic right
he wanders.
here, I'm going to be
he needs a cameraman to follow him otherwise.
And then I get distracted, and then I'm looking over here.
Okay, last question is from Photo and Car Geek. I think the question about pixel binning was not only about Quad Bear, but also about the Leica M and its 60 megapixels and the ability to reduce the pixel count of the output. This is also rumored to appear in the Canon R5 Mark II camera that has not been announced, I want to point out. Good thing? Bad thing? I think that if the lenses were able to resolve 60 megapixels, then we should have the best of both worlds. But Canon lenses don't resolve that, and far from it. So what's the point? Is it a pure marketing exercise? This should have been in tech support. I'm sorry for putting it and never read the comments.
So, first of all, lots of Canon lenses are going to resolve more than 60 megapixels. They got a bunch of stupid sharp glass right now.
Stupid sharp.
But secondly, back when the M11 was first introduced, Chris and I did a test, and we shot that sensor at its 60, I believe it was 35 and 24 megapixel modes. And they said, like, reduce the resolution for improved low light performance. And we were like, is it actually doing something on the sensor to change that? What's happening here? And we saw the same thing we've been saying for years is, yes, if you look at them at 1-to-1 magnification, you will see more noise at the higher resolution because you're zooming in more. But if you look at them at the same viewing size, we saw the exact same noise levels at the lower resolution capture and the higher resolution capture. So this is different from a Quad Bayer where it is actually binning on the chip to try and soak up a little bit more light. It looks like it's just doing kind of a resizing algorithm, which is nice to have. Sometimes you want to shoot small raw files. And not have, a bunch of weird moire and things like that. It does a good job in that regard, but you're not buying low light performance by doing it. That's a common misconception.
Anything to add, Chris?
No, that pretty much covers it.
Cool. And that is it. We managed to get through the longest stack of comments that I've attempted to put into one episode.
We're caught up.
Yeah. We're basically caught up. I have one speak pipe that came in yesterday before I put this together, so I'm sure we'll get more, and I'll make sure to read those comments next week as well, guys. We legitimately
they're gonna suck. Next week.
Legitimately want to hear your thoughts on the main story today, the CineStill thing, because they did have a terrible week, and we really value your opinion on this sort of thing. How many of you guys were actually paying attention, and what are your thoughts now? If you weren't paying attention, what do you think coming at it from a completely objective point of view? Just been introduced to the topic today. Let us know. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. We'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.